So good morning, everybody. Good morning. So, oh, I've got the echo again. Maybe not. It's 4th of July upon us again. And when 4th of July comes, it reminds me of Claude Anshin Thomas. Do people know who Anshin is? Anybody heard of him? No. Okay. He is a monk in our lineage. He was ordained by Bernie Glassman. I think he may be the only monk in our lineage, but when Bernie ordained him, he said he didn't want to be a priest, he wanted to be a monk. Bernie said, okay, you're a monk. So anyway, but his story is that he is a Vietnam vet. He was a door gunner on a helicopter in Vietnam. And one of the lovely features of that war is that we kept a count of all the people killed by each soldier. So he had over 100 kills confirmed. And he has had to live with that karma, with those ghosts ever since. And he is perhaps the most tormented soul I've ever encountered. He came here to Maine a few years, I don't know, more than a few years ago now, Rockland, Maine. And I was working with vets at the time, and a couple of the vets said they wanted to go see him. So we went to see him and heard his story. And to begin to understand the level of his torment, when Bernie ordained him, it was in Poland. He ordained him at a retreat in Poland. And Anshin walked from there to Vietnam. He walked from Poland to Vietnam. So, he's just terribly driven by his past. But the reason I think of him at July 4th is because one of the things he mentioned is that he literally leaves the country on July 4th because he cannot hear the fireworks. He cannot be around all those explosions without terrible consequences. And yeah. It was always one of the paradoxes, because he's not unique among vets for having that problem. He's also not unique in that there are many pets who go through the same thing. I'm aware of a lovely little dog right now who is a survivor of a hurricane in North Carolina, one of those stray adoptee dogs, and survived a terrible hurricane. And that poor dog has to be completely sedated on 4th of July. Cannot be around that. So to me, it's one of the bizarre paradoxes of our society that somehow, in the name of patriotism, we do something that hurts the very people who defended that ideal. But anyway, so at the end of the sit today, I'd like to do the Tara mantra for all beings that have been affected by wars and other catastrophes. I've got a bunch of things today that I want to talk about. I'm going to try to think how I'm going to sort of tie them together. But one of the things is did people come across the article this week in the Atlantic or last week about the Zen monk in Vermont who declared that this was going to be the end of the world? Did anyone run into that? Yeah, so I want to talk about a little bit about him and a little bit about what he's saying, which is kind of interesting. And he is in Vermont, and they're calling it a monastery. The piece is in the Atlantic. If you want to read the whole piece, it's in the Atlantic. And he's got what he calls a monastery in Vermont. I don't know if it's actually a monastery or if that's the reporter kind of distorting things a little. I mean, they showed a picture of a yurt and stuff like that. But anyway. And he does a pretty, from again, the flavor of the article, a pretty hardcore Zen practice. Now, when I say hardcore, among other things, they're doing 108 prostrations, which full prostrations down to the floor, and that is not, I understand that this guy from the article, this guy studied Zen in Japan, and that is not a Japanese practice. That's a Korean practice. So I think he's gone out of his way to find some really tough things for people to do. His retreats sound a little brutal, frankly. And that raises a whole interesting question. I think somebody should study these things. I don't, if you have a spectrum of sort of hardcore Zen on one end, and I think, at least from what I read in the article, he's pretty far over in that side of the spectrum. And then, kind of ridiculous softcore Zen like us. There's, really kind of the interesting question, like, which works? Does one work better than the other? I assume that the hardcore Zen people think that their way is the best, and it's going to bring about enlightenment most efficiently, I guess, for lacking another word. But I'm not aware of any evidence one way or another. It would really be interesting if somebody did a study of that, and whether or not the hardcore practices in fact paid off. When I practiced at Zen Mountain Monastery, which is, it's pretty well up there on the hardcore scale. It's not maybe the 108 prostrations, but it's getting there. One of the things I found was that there are a myriad of ways of which people can attach to that practice. Even though they didn't say it, the monks were extremely proud of the fact that they could sit longer than anybody else and move less than anybody else, and all that sort of things. So it's like, it can be almost like an athletic endeavor in which we're attaching to the hardcore aspects. 108 prostrations could be the same kind of thing. Most of us would go directly to the hospital from the 108, from the 32 that we could do. Anyway, but that said, it's of interest to me that no one has kind of really thought to study that, and find out. I think there could be a methodology. But I personally do not believe that there are great or significant or maybe any benefits to that kind of hardcore practice, especially to people who are living in the world, who are lay practitioners. Now, while I'm in that vein, the other thing that kind of comes up, not specific to this Atlantic article, but is the whole question of gradual versus sudden enlightenment, which has been popping up in some daisans recently. And of course, there's always been sort of two schools of thought in Zen. The one thought that's one school that says, the sudden enlightenment, that's it. You have to have the massive kensho, this earth-shaking experience. And the gradual that says that you go along and you practice and you transform and so on and so forth. And then like someday, all of a sudden, poof, there you are. No 4th of July fireworks. And I once had a conversation about this with Margaret, my teacher, and she kind of, her feeling is that the gradual is much more common. That most people do not have the spectacular, dramatic kensho experiences, but they get there nonetheless. And I'm saying that from the perspective that it's a really dangerous attachment to get attached to kensho, to get attached to enlightenment. When you are practicing, every day, every minute that you are practicing, you are revealing your Buddha nature. You are revealing the one body more and more. More and more. There's nothing special that you have to do beyond practice, beyond sitting, beyond working on manifesting compassion. And so on. So a lot of people come to Zen Daishan. I'm not going to, point fingers at you if it happens to be you. So I don't know how I can comment on that. I haven't been enlightened. You all have flashes. You all have moments. You all have insights. You all have understandings. Don't have to have had that massive kensho. Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. I don't know. It's a mysterious thing. I mean, Brad Warner talks about the same thing. It's completely unpredictable. It's unpredictable. But I remember years ago, there was kind of a well-known monk in Japan who had been in the monastery, I forget, many years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And the big deal about it was he had never had kensho, and they showed him, and he's sweeping the leaves on the patio, and he's perfectly calm and fully attentive and absorbed, and I'm thinking, okay, what is he missing? What is he missing? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I encourage you to let go of worrying about kensho, thinking about kensho, blah, blah, blah. Just practice. Just practice. Go back to the essential fact. Buddha nature is not something you acquire, it's something you already have. As Dogen says, you are already enlightened. You are already enlightened. You just don't see it. And so we're just kind of stripping away. And someday you'll say, oh, yeah, I see it. But it isn't either or. It isn't an absolute. It's a process. And you are transforming and opening and awakening every time that you sit down on the cushion. A quick Korea story. We mentioned Koreans, and I told this story to Kathy this week. And Kathy, are your feet up? Okay. She's healing it from an injury, so she's supposed to keep her feet up. And like all of us, she's not so good about following doctor's advice. Okay. Anyway, so the Korean story, tell it really quickly, and then I'm going on too long here. Anyway, But it's a kind of funny anecdote. But long before I did Zen, I was a martial arts teacher, martial arts master, blah, blah, blah. And my ex-wife and I were the only non-Koreans who were invited to a dinner in honor of a monk who was visiting from Korea. And we were in Vermont at the time. And so we went, And some point in the evening, this monk, he's speaking through a translator and looks at me and he says, well, you and I were Dharma brothers in another life. I'm like, oh, no, it's nice. And then he says, so I would love it if you would come and visit my monastery in Korea. And I'm like, whoa, this is a big honor being invited to go to Korea and visit this guy's place. Well, later in the evening, he was telling a little bit about the life in his monastery in Korea. And one of the things he said was that when people are getting old and they haven't had kensho, what they do is they lock them in a little box with a little slot. And each day they put some food in that slot. And eventually, either the person has control and they ask to be released from the box, or the plate of food doesn't come back and they know they have to remove the corpse. And that immediately squashed any thought that I had about going to visit this guy's place in Korea. But that shows me where hardcore Zen can go and where this attachment to Kensho can go. And that, is that we'd want to spend our last days locked in a box waiting for Kensho? Is that what the Buddha taught us? I don't know. I'm not going to judge that, but I'm just telling the anecdote. So hardcore versus softer, gentler, kinder Zen. And I certainly lean towards the latter. One of you wants to undertake the study, I'll help you. Okay, so now to the actual subject of my talk. I've been wandering around here for a little bit. And I actually have a koan here. This is one of my favorite koans. Yanyan asked Dawu, what does the Bodhisattva of great compassion, what does he use so many hands and eyes for? I'll stop there. If you've ever seen Avalokiteshvara depicted, Bodhisattva of compassion, many arms. And then in the center of each palm is a little eye. So Avalokiteshvara has many hands and many eyes. Wu said it's like someone reaching back, groping for a pillow in the middle of the night. Yen said, I understand. Wu said, how do you understand it? Yen said, all over the body are hands and eyes. Wu said, you have said quite a bit there, but you've only said 80% of it. Yen said, what do you say, elder brother? Wu said, throughout the body are hands and eyes. So I love this koan, and I talk about it periodically because I think it's the best description of compassion I have ever encountered. It is like reaching for a pillow in the middle of the night. Now, we've all done that, right? The pillow slips away and we grab, what are we thinking about then? Not thinking about, thinking about, oh my goodness, I need to be more efficient about how I stick the pillow under my head. And No, there's no story. There's no narrative. There's no ambition. There's none of that. You reach over, boom, pillows back under the head. Such a beautiful metaphor for the working of compassion. It's not something we create. It's not something we develop a narrative around. It's something that we just do reflexively, automatically, without thinking about it. It arises spontaneously from our fundamental nature, our Buddha nature. And again, sort of back to that earlier thing. Don't have to have Kensho to act spontaneously from the basis of our Buddha nature. This is what sitting is doing for us, right? It's opening us to relate to the world without thinking in a narrative way, without constructing the stories. It's helping us to just be, to just react. I know it's the wrong word. Respond, I think. The mindfulness people say we're supposed to respond, not react. So, but anyway, it's just to interact with the world based on what we call our true nature, our fundamental nature, our Buddha nature, all of these names for that. What does it mean? It means we just get our ego out of the way. We don't create the narratives about ourselves and our involvement, and aren't I good doing this, or aren't I bad doing this, or aren't I such a nice, helpful human being, or, so whatever. We just respond from the very core of who we are. So I love this. I just love this koan. And then he responds. Yen responds and says, all over the body and hands and eyes. Right? And Dawu says that's only 80%. And he says, all through the body or hands and eyes. Right? It's the very essence of our being when that compassion is revealed. So, time. Okay, so I actually kind of working my way around here to the subject of the talk, which I mentioned. So I saw this little headline this week that says Zen teacher in Vermont says that this is the apocalypse, life is ending. And I thought that was interesting on a whole lot of levels, because nobody listens to Zen teachers. So here we are, it's like, okay, if I said that, but somehow this Zen teacher got the attention of as I subsequently found out, an author a writer from the Atlantic. So I found the article, and what he is particularly talking about, he's talking about all the existential threats as we are, and particularly about AI. This guy is very focused on the destructive potential of AI. And somehow has gotten the attention of people in Silicon Valley, so that they're coming from Silicon Valley to his little place in Vermont to do retreats. Kind of interesting. Because I haven't got open on the computer at the moment, but his idea is that essentially we've got to give AI Buddha nature instead of destructive nature. I was oversimplifying a little bit. No, but it's basically that idea, that if we can't, that AI is going to destroy us unless we can create AI that's fundamentally compassionate and values life and all of those types of things. And the article talks about how, the AI thinkers, many of whom are very skeptical about that, and who are very, very concerned about the existential threat that AI represents. But I also felt, and it isn't, when I read the snippet, it's his opinion sounded very nihilistic. And as I read the article, it's really not so. Again, he's somehow got the attention of these people from Silicon Valley, and they're coming to him. And I don't know, he's going to Maui to spend time with the guy who created Siri, and which that sounds like a terrible burden to have to bear, snorkeling in Maui in order to save the earth. But it sounds like he's willing to make the sacrifice. But somehow he's got these guys listening to him, that's kind of fascinating in and of itself. And this idea that we have to build, this is my language, build Buddha nature into AI. Maybe teach the AI to do the 108 prostrations we could get. So I'm, kind of linking this back to the compassion, linking it back to the compassion. And where do we go in these times? This is the continual question. I mean, I address it frequently, and probably from maybe somewhat redundant perspectives. But I thought, well, what this guy's doing is amazing. It's very creative. He's engaging. And he evidently knows nothing. He knows nothing about coding, or, he's just like many of the rest of us. He's not technologically savvy, and he's just coming from the level of his practice and what he's seeing around him. But I thought, well, that's it. He's engaging. And the fact that he's got the attention of some of the people that he does, he's probably engaging more effectively than many of the rest of us. But he's engaging. And I think that's the point. He's seeing the destructive capacity that's there. He's seeing the fragility of life in these times. But he's not allowing that to drive him into a space of nihilism. He's using that as the basis of his response. He's doing something. Will he be effective? Who knows? Will he make a difference? I don't know. But he's engaging. He's doing something. And I think that's the lesson here. That's the example for all of us. As I've said repeatedly, we need to engage. We need to be awake. First and foremost, we need to be awake. If we don't see it, we can't address it. And that's awake to all the terrible existential threats that are going on right now. And that's hard. That's not easy. Maybe when I think probably almost everybody came to Zen at some level wanting to address their own suffering. I try to interview people and learn a little bit about their aspirations when they're new students, and no one's ever said to me, I'm here because I want to be a bodhisattva. People come, and I include myself in this, because there's some degree of suffering. There's some degree of angst, fear, anger, whatever it is. Look at Anshin. Why does he come to Zen? He is driven by his suffering, and he's suffering 1,000 times what most of us suffer in this lifetime. So we come to heal our own suffering. But as we practice, we learn that we are part of this one body, and our suffering is not an independent entity. Our suffering is related to all the suffering of all beings. And we cannot be at peace while other beings are suffering. That's what this bodhisattva idea teaches us. And to me, it's inescapable. Again, in sort of earlier forms of Buddhism, as you know, personal enlightenment was the goal. And then essentially you were done. You could just go off and be in a cave and be enlightened for the rest of your life. And that's what the monks did. But this bodhisattva vow says, no, that enlightenment isn't for you. You've got to use it for the world. You've got to use it to save all sentient beings. Right? Now I've changed that. We don't say that anymore. We say all creations. Right? We used to say sentient beings. Then at some point we realized everything was sentient. Panpsychism took hold. And so we're saving all creations. Now, there may be times, days, weeks, months that we don't feel that way. Our own suffering rises to the top. That's inevitable. That we're not so, well, I won't say we. I am not so egoist that there are not times when something that's bothering me doesn't grab my attention. And all of a sudden, it's about me. But ideally, our practice shouldn't be about me. I like John Kabat-Zinn's phrase, the full catastrophe. It's about embracing the full catastrophe. It's about practicing for all beings. And it's using our life to whatever extent we can for all beings. And that may occur in remarkably simple, ordinary ways. I've been having a conversation with some people in Daesan about this. Ordinary, simple ways. We don't have to be working for the UN saving millions, although that's not precluded. But most of us, that's not our story. That's not our life. Our life is simple. We interact with family and friends. We go to the store and shop. We do simple things. We're not on a grand stage. We don't have people from Silicon Valley coming to sit with us. That would be kind of funny, wouldn't it? But here we are. So, but we can, in our own simple, ordinary way, in our own simple, ordinary lives, make a difference. We can extend our practice into everything that we do, into every interaction that we have. We can be more open, we can be kinder, we can be more gentle, we can be more compassionate, we can be more loving, we can be more healing, we can be more understanding, we can be more friendly. The list goes on. In the regular context of our ordinary lives. We can and we are transforming the world every single day. And because this is one body, you know, kind of get, now flip back around on this whole, what does this whole enlightenment thing show us? It shows us that this is one body. One body. Separation is an illusion. If you haven't experienced that, take my word for it. Would I lie about such a thing? This is one body. What does that mean? It means that every piece affects every other piece, even though we may not see that in our day-to-day experience. You know, if you stub your toe, your entire body responds, may go into shock, right? Entire body, because it's not separate. The toe is not separate from the head. All part of the body. Well, the same with our lives in the world. This is truly, absolutely one body. And therefore, everything that we do affects everything else. You know, I mean, people are starting to understand this more. You know, we've got things like quantum entanglements and so on and so forth. But we don't need the, you know, Shakyamuni didn't know about quantum entanglements. His teaching arose out of his insight from his direct experience. And we can all have that direct experience. We can all know what that's talking about. Okay. So I would like to close with the Tara mantra, and I'll take a second to those, a number of you haven't done this before. So the Tara mantra is a Tibetan practice, a Tibetan mantra. And it invokes the energy of green Tara. Who's green Tara? Well, she's the feminine manifestation of compassion. You know, initially in Buddhist iconography, the compassion was depicted as a man, Avalokiteshvara, in India. And Indians had Avalokiteshvara. But when Buddhism spread to the other Asian countries, almost universally, they said, no, compassion is feminine, and we need a woman. Right? So we have Kuan Yin, and we have green Tara. And when we're doing this mantra, that's the idea, that we're invoking that compassionate feminine energy in the universe. So today, I'm going to dedicate it, and then any of you that want to add to the dedication, anybody that you want to give this specifically to, feel free. But I'm dedicating it today to Anshin and to all the people that have been hurt, damaged, destroyed by wars, including the terrible war that's going on right now. So at this time of setting off fireworks, also remembering the suffering of all those people.